Brandon Sanderson is not a romance author. If you know who it is, that probably doesn't need to be said. But the rules that he has for magic, which are sort of accepted as gospel in the writing community, can actually be applied really well, not just to romance, but to other genres as well. If you're not in the know, Brandon Sanderson is a fantasy author, absolutely prolific. He's got so many books and they sell really well. And he's also a lecturer. You can watch all of his classes for free on YouTube. But I'm Sam, a romance author based in the UK, and today I'm going to talk about how I take his laws of magic and I use them to write my romance novels, and how you can use them to apply to any genre that you're working in, because they really are quite flexible and applicable to a wide range of things. Brandon Sanderson's laws of magic exist to help writers establish magic systems in fantasy worlds and novels that feel both exciting and compelling, but also feel like an integral part of the plot and something that's really helping to inform the story. So these rules of magic are meant to help integrate the magic better into the rest of the story. There's 3-ish rules of magic, though there is what's called a zeroth law, which we'll go to at the end. The first rule is an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. So let's break this one down. What it's essentially saying is that if you're going to use magic to solve a problem in the story, the reader has to understand the magic well enough in order for that solution to feel impactful. So an example of this is in Harry Potter, when he uses the Patronus charm to fend off the Dementors. Expecto Patronum! That is most valuable because you understand from the scenes in the classroom where they're learning the Patronus charm to begin with, how it works and what the cost of that is and what is informing the shape of the Patronus, all of that. That scene becomes less impactful if you don't understand the Patronus charm. So how does this apply to other genres? I like to think of it in terms of characterization, right? There's nothing worse than when you're reading a book and the solution and the way everything comes together at the end feels out of nowhere. And usually this isn't because an author has just sort of pulled something out of thin air to use in that part of the story. It's because of the iceberg effect, where the author knows a lot more about their characters than the reader does. And yes, only a small portion of this is going to end up on the page, but sometimes authors can overcorrect and they'll make something happen on the page where the motivation for that is sort of under the surface and something that they only know, rather than something that they've communicated clearly to the readers. And therefore what happens is the reader feels blindsided, or it feels uncharacteristic, or it feels like a deus ex machina, and the appreciation for it goes completely out the window. So the way I apply Sanderson's law of magic, that the ability to solve conflict with magic depends on the reader's understanding of the magic, is the same but with character traits. So the ability to solve conflict or solve a plot problem with a character action is only as effective as how well the reader will understand that action and the character trait that has made it happen. Ideally, this should be linked to the character arc that you've been building the whole time, but even if it isn't, it's got to be something that isn't just lurking under the surface or something that you, the author, know. It's got to be something that you've shown to the reader in another part of the story. You need to lay the groundwork for that payoff early on, so that then when your character does act or does say something or does think something, it feels well-founded to the reader. Second law of magic. Weaknesses, limits, and costs are more interesting than powers. So I'm gonna nerd out for this example for a second. I play Dungeons and Dragons sometimes, and in Dungeons and Dragons, all of the spells that you have the opportunity to cast have a cost, and that cost is commensurate with the impact of that spell. So for example, you might have a really low impact spell where all you need is like a lucky coin and you get to reuse it over and over again. But if you want to resurrect someone, you need a diamond worth 50,000 gold pieces, and it gets consumed during the spell. So basically the cost of doing that really important thing is meaningful to your character, and it's meaningful to the party because you have to pool resources in order to achieve that. And the way that I like to apply this rule to genres other than fantasy and to things other than magic is the idea of trade-off. Nothing should just fall out of the sky as like a perfect opportunity. Every happy ever after has to be earned with that trade-off. What is your character having to give up in order to get the thing that they want? What does your character have to lose in order to get to where they want to be? And what is the cost on them as a person to sacrifice those things? Those explorations are meaningful and exciting to the reader because it creates more payoff when that decision is made. And then going back to the first law, you have to lay the groundwork for that before. So when you're writing a story, you're planting all of these seeds of things that are important to your character, or things that they have that they just can't let go of, and then they have to let go of them in order to get the thing that they want, in order to get that happy ever after and that payoff. And because you've planted all those seeds along the way, that payoff will be greater for your reader. So these laws are starting to work together, and hopefully you can see how that's happening. Then we go to the third law, which is the author should expand on what is already a part of the magic system before something entirely new is added, as this may otherwise entirely change how the magic system fits into the fictional world. So there's two parts of this. The first part of this law is essentially saying go deep before you go wide, right? If you're going to introduce an element, make sure that that element is thoroughly explored and not just a throwaway before you start introducing other things. The second part of this is saying that everything you introduce has to work together, and the relationships between those things have to feel impactful. So for example, in another genre, if you've got a side character over here and a side character over here, they need to have some kind of impact on each other, or they need to be balancing out different elements of your main character. And maybe you should explore those side characters that you have before introducing a third side character. It's about making sure that nothing is throwaway. Everything is meaningful. And I read a book just the other day where there were just so many side characters and side plots and different plot elements that one, it felt like none of it was sort of impactful to the character or to the other parts of the story. And two, it felt like everything was really inconsequential because none of it was explored enough to feel meaningful to me as a reader. So when I'm writing, I try to avoid that by making sure that if I am introducing new things, that it's being done in a way that is respectful of the dynamic that I've already created. And that's not to say you can't have a big cast of characters. I have so many side characters in especially my second book, The Summer Wedding in Santorini. But those side characters all impact each other and impact the group dynamic. There's not a single side character in there that is unimpactful to the rest of the cast. And the same could be true with other story elements as well. If you think about like crime and thriller, then maybe you're thinking about like clues to the whodunit or the whydunit. The same thing is true there, where every single thing that you introduce is going to be thought of within the context of the whole, and so you as the author need to be cognizant of that. Every piece you introduce is part of the big picture puzzle, and you need to be respectful of that as you're crafting it. Otherwise, the readers can feel frustrated and they can feel a lack of payoff in one or more of those areas. Which brings us to the zeroth law, which is always err on the side of what's awesome. And essentially what this is saying is if one of these rules isn't working for you because you would be able to do something awesome if you broke it, then break it. In D&D we call this the rule of cool. If you can sort of justify something based on how awesome the outcome would be, then it's fine if it breaks a few rules in the process. Just make sure that you're being really intentional about it. You're not breaking the rules because you can't be bothered to follow them or because it's too complicated to follow them. That's your job as the author. if you break the rules, it should be because the payoff is greater than if you did follow those rules. I've loved watching some of Brandon Sanderson's classes online. Like I said, they're all free here on YouTube, so I would definitely recommend checking them out if you want to learn more about his approach to world building and fantasy in general, but his rules of magic are something in particular that I find really applicable to other genres, including romance, which I write. You can see me applying some of these rules in my writing vlogs, which I put out every week, so make sure you hit subscribe to follow along and so that you don't miss any of those. And I'd also love to hear from you who some of your favorite people are to learn from about writing. I'm going to be doing some reviews of some writing books and other writing resources on the channel here, so I'd love to know in the comments what your favorite go-to resources are so that I can check them out myself. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!